The silence in the Valerian conference room stretched for long minutes. Admiral Kethmar stared at the tactical display showing his surrounded fleet. 200 of the Empire's finest warships, trapped by an enemy they thought they had already defeated. His clawed hands trembled as the reality of the situation sank in. "You want my surrender?" he said slowly. "The surrender of the entire Third Fleet." "Not just your fleet," Deho replied calmly. "The surrender of all Valerian forces in human space. Complete withdrawal from our territories. Reparations for the damage you've caused. And a promise that this aggression will never happen again." Around the room, Valerian officers shifted nervously. Some muttered among themselves in their hissing language. Others stared at the humans with something approaching fear. These three small beings had just demonstrated that everything the Empire believed about warfare was wrong. So Min watched the aliens with new understanding. For 3 years, she had seen them as unstoppable conquerors. Giant reptiles with advanced technology and overwhelming numbers. But now she could see the truth. They were bullies who had never faced real resistance. "The Valerian Empire has conquered 47 species," Kethmar said, trying to salvage some dignity. "We have never surrendered to anyone." 47 species that couldn't fight back effectively, Taehyun observed. Species that followed normal military doctrine. Species that surrendered when defeat became mathematically certain. "You've never fought humans before?" The security officer moved to stand beside one of the tactical displays. With casual efficiency, he began pointing out the flaws in the Valerian battle formation. "No mobile reserves. No contingency plans. All your ships clustered together like targets in a shooting gallery. You fight like you've never faced an intelligent opponent." Admiral Kethmar's pride burned, but he couldn't argue with the results. His perfect battle formation had become a perfect trap. The humans had maneuvered him exactly where they wanted him without firing a single shot. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "Planning? We weren't planning anything," Deho replied. "We were hoping you would be reasonable, that you would accept negotiated boundaries or limited trade agreements. But we've learned to prepare for the worst-case scenario." "Since the Long Dark," So Min added, finally understanding her own people's history. "Every human military officer studies the ancient campaigns, not just as history but as current tactical doctrine. We've been preparing for this exact situation for 2,000 years. The ambassador nodded approvingly at his aide. "Ms. Park is correct. The Long Dark taught us that sometimes you face an enemy who cannot be reasoned with, an enemy who sees compromise as weakness and mercy as invitation for more attacks. The Devourers were such an enemy. And you defeated them," Kethmar said quietly. "We didn't just defeat them," Taehyun corrected. "We erased them. Completely, every ship, every base, every trace of their civilization. When humans decide that an enemy is too dangerous to exist, we are very thorough." The implications hung in the air like a threat. The Valerians had seen the images of dead Devourer machines floating in space, an entire galactic empire, reduced to scrap metal by a species that refused to surrender. "But that's not what we want here," Deho said quickly. "The Devourers gave us no choice. They couldn't be negotiated with or reasoned with. You can be. The question is whether you will be." Kethmar's communication officer approached hesitantly. "Sir, message from the home fleet. They're ordering immediate withdrawal from human space. The Emperor himself has signed the order." "The Emperor?" Kethmar's voice was barely a whisper. "Word of today's events has reached the capital," Deho explained. "Your Emperor is wiser than his field commanders. He understands that some fights aren't worth winning." So Min pulled up a report on her tablet. "According to our intelligence services, 17 allied species have already begun withdrawing from human territory. The Crystalline Collective has offered to mediate peace negotiations. Even the Zephyrian War Council is calling for immediate ceasefire. They're abandoning the Empire?" an officer asked in disbelief. "They're being pragmatic," Taehyun replied. "News travels fast in the galaxy. By now, every military intelligence service knows that humanity just turned complete defeat into total victory in under 3 hours. That kind of tactical flexibility makes us very dangerous enemies." Admiral Kethmar slumped in his chair. His career was over. His fleet was trapped. His empire had abandoned him. And all because he had underestimated a species that looked physically weak and technologically inferior. "What happens to us?" he asked. "To my crews?" "That depends on you," Deho replied. "Surrender now, withdraw peacefully, and your people go home. Continue fighting and we'll demonstrate why the Devourers are extinct." The choice was simple, but Kethmar's pride made it difficult. He had never surrendered to anyone. The very concept was alien to his warrior culture, but the alternative was the complete destruction of his fleet and the probable end of his species' military power. "If I surrender," he said slowly, "what guarantee do I have that you won't pursue us? That you won't invade our territory in return?" Daiho considered the question seriously. "You have our word. But more than that, you have our nature. Humans don't conquer for the sake of conquest. We fight to protect our people. Once our people are safe, we have no reason to continue fighting. Rule number 1, So-min said quietly, we never leave our people behind. But we also don't pursue enemies who are no longer a threat." Taehyun nodded. The Devourers were different. They couldn't stop consuming and expanding. They were a permanent threat to all life in the galaxy. "You're just soldiers following orders. End the threat and we have no quarrel with you." The Admiral looked around the room one more time. His officers waited for his decision. Outside, 200 of the Empire's finest ships hung helpless in space, surrounded by an enemy they had thought they understood. "Computer," Kethmar said in a defeated voice, "prepare formal surrender documents. Full withdrawal from human space. All Valerian forces to return to Empire territory immediately." "Sir," his communication officer said, "what about the reparations? The compensation for damages?" Admiral Kethmar looked at Daiho, who smiled sadly. "Standard galactic law applies. Financial compensation for destroyed property, medical support for wounded civilians, and a formal apology to the families of the dead." "Acceptable," the Admiral said quietly. As the surrender documents were prepared, So-min found herself studying the Valerian officers. They looked defeated but not broken, humiliated but not destroyed. The humans had given them a way out that preserved their lives and their dignity. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "why are we being so generous? They killed thousands of our people." "Because, Ms. Park, the goal was never revenge. The goal was protecting our people and ensuring this never happens again. Dead enemies can't learn from their mistakes. Live enemies can spread the word about what happens when you threaten human civilians." Taehyun checked his watch. "Civilian evacuation complete. All transports have reached safe distance. The immediate threat to our people is over, which means rule number 1 has been satisfied," Daiho concluded. "Our people are safe. The war is over." An hour later, the Valerian fleet began its withdrawal from human space. Ship by ship, they powered down their weapons and turned toward home. Admiral Kethmar's surrender had been broadcast throughout the galaxy, along with recordings of the battle that never happened. As the last Valerian ship disappeared into hyperspace, So-min stood beside her mentor on the bridge of the Harmony's edge. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home," Daiho replied. "We rebuild what was damaged. We remember the people we lost. And we prepare for the next time someone decides to test our resolve." "Will there be a next time?" Taehyun answered from his position at the sensor station. "Eventually. There always is. But it won't be the Valerians. And word of today will spread. It might be decades before anyone else tries." "Long enough for our children to grow up in peace," So-min said hopefully. "That's all we can ask for," Daiho agreed. "Peace for our children. Everything else is just details." As their ship turned toward Earth, So-min reflected on everything she had learned. Diplomacy wasn't just about negotiation and compromise. Sometimes it was about demonstrating that some lines could never be crossed. Sometimes the best way to preserve peace was to show your enemies exactly what war with humans really meant. Behind them, the galaxy began to spread a new story. A story about a species that looked weak but fought like demons when their children were threatened. A species that would rather die than surrender when civilians needed protection. A species that had once fought gods and won. The story spread from system to system, from species to species, until every corner of the galaxy knew the most important lesson of all. Rule number 1 wasn't just a human saying, it was a promise. Admiral Kethmar stared at the holographic images of dead devourer machines floating in space. His reptilian mind struggled to process what he was seeing. An entire galactic empire gone, destroyed by the same species that now sat calmly in his conference room. "This is ancient history," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Your ancestors' victories don't matter now. We have you surrounded. Your fleets are destroyed, are they?" Daiho asked quietly. The ambassador touched his wrist device again. This time he wasn't activating a historical display. Admiral Kethmar's tactical screens began lighting up with new contacts. At first he thought it was a malfunction. Ships were appearing on his sensors that hadn't been there moments before. "Impossible," breathed one of his officers. "These readings show human vessels throughout the system, but we destroyed their fleet days ago." Deho smiled sadly. "You destroyed the ships we wanted you to see. The old vessels. The ones that were already scheduled for decommission. Did you really think we would send our entire fleet into an obvious trap?" More contacts appeared on the Valerian screens. What they had dismissed as space debris was moving. Asteroid mining platforms were revealing hidden weapon systems. Cargo containers that had been drifting for weeks were suddenly powering up their engines. "You see, Admiral," Deho continued, "you made one critical error. You assumed that because you could defeat our visible forces, you had defeated us. But we've been fighting existential wars since before your species discovered fire." Taehyun stepped closer to the tactical display, studying the enemy positions with professional interest. Standard Valerian fleet deployment. All major ships bunched together for maximum firepower. No screening vessels. No mobile reserves. "You fight like you've never faced a real opponent. How dare you?" Kethmar started to roar, but the words died in his throat as more ships appeared on his sensors. These weren't the battered human vessels he had been fighting for 3 years. These were something else entirely. From the edge of the star system, massive energy signatures announced the arrival of the real human fleet. Ships that dwarfed anything the Valerians had seen before emerged from hyperspace. Their hulls gleamed with fresh construction, and their weapon systems hummed with barely contained power. "The evacuation ships you thought you were chasing?" Somin said, finally understanding her role in the plan. "They weren't running away. They were drawing your forces into position." She had spent 3 years learning diplomacy, but only now did she understand what human diplomacy really meant. It wasn't about negotiation or compromise. It was about giving the enemy one last chance to walk away before the real fight began. "Every human child learns about the long dark," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Not as history lessons, but as training. We learn that sometimes the impossible situation is where you make your stand." Admiral Kethmar's tactical display showed the truth of their situation. His fleet was surrounded. What had seemed like a moment of triumph had become a carefully orchestrated trap. But more than that, he was beginning to understand something fundamental about his enemy. The humans weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting with the absolute certainty that surrender was not an option. He could see it in their eyes, hear it in their voices. These people would die before they let their children become slaves. "Your terms," Deho said quietly. "Terms?" Kethamar's voice cracked. "For your surrender. You'll need to withdraw from all human territories, of course. Reparations for the colonies you damaged, and a formal apology to the families of the people you killed." The Valerian admiral's world turned upside down. Surrender him? The idea was absurd. He commanded 200 warships and had conquered dozens of species. How could 3 humans on a tiny diplomatic vessel demand his surrender? But the tactical displays didn't lie. His fleet was outnumbered now, outmaneuvered and completely surrounded. Worse, he was starting to understand that this had been planned from the beginning. The humans had led him exactly where they wanted him. "This is impossible," he roared. "We had you defeated. Your colonies were burning. Your fleets were destroyed." Deho's expression became almost sympathetic. "Admiral, let me share something with you. In the language of diplomacy, there are many ways to say no. But in human, there's only one that matters." The ambassador leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried absolute authority throughout the silent conference room. "Rule number 1, we never leave our people behind." The words hit the Valerians like a physical blow. Around the room, officers who had been confident of victory just minutes ago now looked uncertain and afraid. "The evacuation ships you thought you were chasing," Deho continued. "They were bait. The populations evacuated hours before you arrived at each colony. The fleets you destroyed, mostly automated drones with skeleton crews who volunteered for the mission." Taehyun nodded grimly. 12,000 volunteers. They knew they probably wouldn't survive. But they also knew their sacrifice would save millions of civilians. The truth crashed down on Admiral Kethmar like a collapsing building. They hadn't won a war. They had been led through an elaborate performance while the real human forces prepared for this moment. "But why?" he asked weakly. "Why this deception? Why not simply fight us directly?" "Because," Deho explained patiently, "we needed you to believe you had won. We needed you to bunch your forces together, drop your guard and position yourselves exactly where we wanted you. So Min looked around the room at the demoralized Valerian officers. She finally understood why she had been chosen for this mission. Not for her diplomatic skills, but because she was young and inexperienced. Her genuine confusion and fear had helped sell the illusion that humanity was truly defeated. "We don't fight because we're the strongest or the smartest," Taehyun said quietly. "We don't fight because we have the best technology or the largest fleets. We fight because when someone threatens our people, surrender isn't in our vocabulary." The Valerian admiral looked around his bridge, seeing his crew's faces pale with fear. In trying to conquer humanity, they had awakened something they couldn't understand and certainly couldn't defeat. His communications officer approached hesitantly. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 of our allied fleets. The Zephyrian Navy is asking for immediate peace negotiations. The Crystalline Collective has already begun withdrawing from human space. They're abandoning us?" Kethmar whispered. "They're being smart," Daeho replied. "Word travels fast in the galaxy. By now, every species with a functioning intelligence network knows what happened here. They know that humanity just turned a complete defeat into total victory in less than 2 hours." Taehyun checked his watch. "Speaking of time, Admiral, our offer has a deadline. In 30 minutes, those civilian evacuation ships will finish loading and move to safe positions. After that, we won't need to be quite so careful about collateral damage." The meaning was clear. Right now, the humans were being restrained because they had civilians to protect. Once those people were safe, there would be nothing holding back a species that had spent 2,000 years learning how to fight impossible wars. "Your surrender, Admiral," Daeho repeated, his diplomatic smile never wavering. "Rule number 1 isn't just our first rule. It's the only rule that matters. And you've just learned why that's more important than all the weapons in the galaxy." Admiral Kethmar looked at his tactical display one more time. His fleet was trapped, his allies were fleeing, and his enemy had just demonstrated that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. For the first time in his military career, the word surrender didn't seem like a defeat, it seemed like survival. Admiral Kethmar's claws drummed impatiently against the metal table as the humans returned to the conference room. Exactly 1 hour had passed since they left. The Admiral had to admit he was curious about what Earth Command could possibly have told them. Did they still believe they had options? "Well?" he demanded as Daeho took his seat. "What is your answer?" The human diplomat folded his hands calmly in front of him. "I'm afraid we must respectfully decline your generous offer, Admiral." The conference room fell silent. Even the background hum of the ship's engines seemed to pause. Kethmar stared at the human as if he had spoken in an unknown language. "Decline?" The word came out as a growl. "You cannot decline. You have no choice left." "Nevertheless," Daeho replied in the same calm tone, "we must respectfully decline." Kethmar's yellow eyes blazed with fury. His scales shifted color, turning darker as his anger grew. Around the room, other Valerian officers hissed in disbelief. Had these humans lost their minds? "Then you will watch as we destroy every human world," the Admiral roared. He slammed his clawed hand against a control panel. "All ships prepare planet-killer weapons. Target every remaining human colony." Throughout the star system, 200 Valerian warships began charging their most powerful weapons. These were tools designed to crack planets open like eggs. They had been used to end the resistance on dozens of worlds. Soon they would erase humanity from the galaxy entirely. So Min watched the tactical displays with growing horror. Massive energy readings appeared as the alien ships prepared to commit genocide. This was really happening. Her entire species was about to be wiped out because they had refused to surrender. But Daeho seemed completely unconcerned. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that looked like a simple wristwatch. "Computer, please explain to our hosts what the Long Dark was." The device projected a holographic display into the center of the room. At first, the Valerians paid little attention. They had seen human technology before. It was impressive but not threatening. The display showed images of ancient Earth and early human space colonies. 2,000 years ago, Daeho began narrating, humanity encountered a race we called the Devourers. They were sentient machines that consumed entire star systems to fuel their expansion. The holographic images shifted. Now they showed massive mechanical constructs that dwarfed planets, ships the size of moons covered in weapon systems that could shatter reality itself. The Valerians watched with growing unease as the scale of the ancient conflict became clear. The Devourers had technology that made your finest ships look like stone knives, Deho continued. They could manipulate gravity, control time, and create matter from pure energy. They had been conquering galaxies for millions of years. Admiral Kethmar found himself leaning forward despite his anger. The images showed space battles of unimaginable scale. Entire solar systems became battlefields. Planets were moved like chess pieces. Stars themselves were used as weapons. The war lasted 300 years, the ambassador said quietly. We lost 99% of our population. Earth was turned into a radioactive wasteland. Our colonies were reduced to ash. Our fleets were scattered across 1,000 light-years. So-Min stared at the display in shock. This wasn't the sanitized version of history she had learned in school. These images showed the true horror of humanity's darkest period. Billions of people dying. Entire worlds burning. Children starving in underground bunkers while machines hunted them through the ruins of civilization. Any reasonable species would have surrendered. Deho continued. The mathematics were clear. Victory was impossible. Survival seemed unlikely. But there was one problem. The holographic display zoomed in on a group of human survivors hiding in a destroyed city. They were thin and dirty, armed with makeshift weapons. But they were still fighting. Humans don't surrender when our people are in danger, Taehyun said quietly. It's not in our nature. Admiral Kethamar's confidence began to waver. The images showed something he didn't understand. These ancient humans had faced complete extinction, but they kept fighting. Why? What drove them to continue a hopeless war? The Devourers made the same mistake you're making now, Deho explained. They assumed that because they could calculate our defeat, we would accept it. They never learned our first rule, which is, Kethmar asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. We never leave our people behind. The holographic display showed the impossible. Humans fighting back against godlike enemies, not with superior technology or brilliant strategy, but with simple, unbreakable determination. Ship crews that rammed their vessels into devourer constructs, soldiers who fought with improvised weapons against machines that could reshape matter, entire colonies that chose to destroy themselves rather than be consumed. The Devourers couldn't understand it, Deho said. Their logic said that humans should surrender when defeat became mathematically certain. But we kept fighting. We developed new tactics not because they were smart, but because they were so desperate that the machines couldn't predict them. So-Min watched the ancient battles with new understanding. Her people's greatest moment hadn't come from strength or intelligence. It had come from the simple refusal to give up when children needed protection. We turned our greatest weakness into our greatest strength, the ambassador continued. The Devourers saw our refusal to surrender as illogical. We saw it as Tuesday. For the first time since boarding the ship, Taehyun stepped forward. His quiet demeanor fell away completely, revealing something much more dangerous underneath. Officer Taehyun Lee, Terran Special Operations Division, he said formally. My great-grandfather fought at the Battle of the Burning Worlds. My grandmother held the defense line at Kepler Station for 6 months with no supplies and no hope of rescue. My father was at the siege of New Tokyo when we finally broke the Devourer command network. The security officer's hand moved casually to his sidearm. The motion wasn't threatening, just natural. But every Valyrian in the room suddenly felt very aware of how fast humans could move when they needed to. We've been fighting impossible odds for so long that we forgot what impossible means, Taehyun said quietly. Admiral Kethmar's scales rippled with unease. This wasn't how defeated enemies were supposed to behave. They should be begging for mercy, not giving history lessons about ancient victories. Your ancestors' wars mean nothing now, he declared. Though his voice lacked its earlier confidence, the Devourers are gone. You face the Valyrian Empire today. Are they gone? Deho asked mildly. He touched his wrist device again. Computer, show current galactic survey data for the Devourer home systems. New images appeared in the hologram. Dead star systems where entire galaxies had once thrived. Broken machines the size of planets floating cold and silent in the void. The remains of an empire that had conquered the universe, reduced to scrap metal by a species that refused to quit. The Devourers ruled 1,000,000 galaxies, Deho said softly. They had technology beyond imagination. They were immortal, logical, and absolutely certain of their superiority. Do you know what happened to them, Admiral? Kethmar stared at the images of cosmic destruction. Part of him knew what the answer would be, but he couldn't quite believe it. They learned rule number 1, Deho said. Eventually. The massive alien warship floated in space like a metal mountain. Its dark hull stretched for miles, covered in weapon ports that could destroy entire cities. Admiral Kethmar stood on the bridge, his reptilian face twisted into what humans might call a smile. His green scales caught the light from the ship's displays as he watched the debris spinning slowly outside. What used to be the human colony of New Sol was now just broken metal and dead rock. 3 years of war had led to this moment. The humans had fought hard, harder than anyone expected, but now their fleets were destroyed. Their colonies were ash, their resistance was broken. "Sir," hissed one of his officers, pointing at the main screen. "A human ship approaches. Small vessel. They're asking permission to come aboard." Kethmar's yellow eyes focused on the tiny ship appearing on the display. It was barely larger than a shuttle compared to his dreadnought. The hull was covered in scars from battle. Burn marks showed where enemy fire had nearly destroyed it. But somehow it still flew. "They want to surrender," another officer said. Finally, the human ship was called the Harmony's Edge. It carried the blue and white flag of something called the Terran Diplomatic Corps. Mar had never understood why humans sent diplomats to war zones. His people simply conquered or died. There was no middle ground. "Let them come," he ordered. "I want to see the fear in their eyes when they beg for mercy." The docking bay was huge, designed for Valyrian ships. The small human vessel looked like a toy inside it. Steam hissed as the airlock opened. 3 humans stepped out. The first was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore a simple black uniform with small silver stars on his collar. Despite everything that had happened, he walked with his back straight and his head up. This had to be their diplomat. Behind him came a young woman, maybe 30 years old. She looked nervous but tried to hide it. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat style. She carried a small computer tablet and stayed close to the older man. The third human was different. He wore the same black uniform but with no decorations. He was quiet and watchful. His eyes moved around the docking bay, studying everything. Something about him made the Valyrian guards uneasy. "I am Ambassador Dae-Ho Kim," the older human said. His voice was calm and polite. "This is my aide, Somin Park, and security officer Tae-Hyun Lee. We come to discuss terms." The Valyrian escort led them through corridors that could hold 100 humans side by side. Everything was built for beings twice human size. The walls were covered in sharp angles and dark metal. It was meant to frighten visitors, but the 3 humans walked without showing fear. Admiral Kethmar waited in the main conference room. The chamber was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows. Holographic displays showed the current state of the war. Every image told the same story: human defeat. "Welcome aboard the Sovereign's Wrath," Kethmar said. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I am Admiral Kethmar, commander of the Third Fleet and voice of the Valyrian Empire in this sector." Dae-Ho bowed slightly. "Admiral, thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "There is little to discuss," Kethmar replied. He gestured at the displays around them. "Your fleets are destroyed. Your colonies burn. Your homeworld is under siege. The war is over." The holographic images showed the truth of his words. Ship graveyards floated where human fleets once sailed. Planets that had been green with life were now brown and dead. Earth itself was surrounded by Valyrian ships, its orbital defenses crumbling under constant attack. "These are our terms," the Admiral continued. "Complete surrender of all human territory. Dissolution of your government. Your people will serve the Empire as workers and soldiers. In return, we will allow your species to survive." Somin's face went pale as she looked at the displays. This was her first major diplomatic mission. She had studied the theories of negotiation and peacemaking, but the textbooks had never prepared her for this. How could they negotiate when they had nothing left to bargain with? Dae-Ho listened without interrupting. His face showed no emotion as the Admiral listed the terms. Complete slavery for his entire species, the end of human independence, the death of everything they had built over thousands of years. "Your people fought well," Kethmar admitted. "Better than we expected. The resistance at New Tokyo lasted 2 months longer than our computers predicted. The defense of the Kepler colonies cost us more ships than we planned. But courage without strength is meaningless." The Admiral's claws clicked against the metal table as he spoke. "You humans have a saying, yes? Discretion is the better part of valor. Now is the time for discretion. Sign the surrender protocols. Save what remains of your people." Tae-Hyun had not spoken since boarding the ship. He stood behind Daeho like a statue, watching and listening. His hands rested at his sides, but something about his posture suggested he was ready to move very quickly if needed. "Your terms are clear, Admiral," Daeho said finally. "However, I must consult with my superiors before making such an important decision. Our protocols require approval from Earth Command for any surrender." The Valerians laughed. The sound was like stones grinding together. "Earth Command?" one officer hissed. "What authority do they have now? They cannot even defend their own planet." "Nevertheless," Daeho replied calmly, "I must follow proper procedures. 1 hour should be sufficient." Admiral Kethamar's eyes narrowed. Was this human mocking him? Did they not understand their situation? But then he decided it did not matter. Let them waste time with their meaningless procedures. In 1 hour they would sign the surrender or watch their homeworld burn. 1 hour, he agreed, but no longer. "My patience has limits." As the humans were escorted back to their ship, Somin whispered to Daeho, "Sir, what can Earth Command possibly do now? We've seen the tactical displays. There's nothing left." "Patience, Ms. Park," the ambassador replied quietly. "There are things you do not yet understand about our people. About our history. About why we are here." Taehyun finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Rule number 1, he said simply. So Min looked confused, but Daeho nodded. "Indeed. Rule number 1. Behind them, the Valerian admiral watched their small ship disappear into his docking bay. In 1 hour, the war would be over. The humans would surrender and the Empire would gain a new slave species. It was a good day for the Empire. He had no idea that the real war was just beginning. The communications room aboard the Harmony's Edge was cramped and dark. Equipment hummed quietly as Daeho activated the quantum transmitter. The device was one of the few pieces of advanced technology the humans still had working. Most of their fleet was gone, but they could still talk to Earth. So Min watched nervously as her superior worked the controls. She had been his aide for 6 months now, but she still felt like she understood very little. The ambassador seemed calm despite their impossible situation. How could anyone be calm when facing the complete destruction of their species? "Quantum link established," Daeho announced. "Connection to Earth Command confirmed." The air above the transmitter began to glow. Slowly, a 3-dimensional image formed. It was a woman in a crisp military uniform, though the image flickered and sparked with interference. Fleet Admiral Mi Young Choi appeared tired but alert. Behind her, red warning lights flashed and distant explosions could be heard. "Daeho," the Admiral said, "I was hoping to hear from you." "What's the situation out there?" "The Valerians have offered surrender terms," the ambassador replied. "Complete capitulation. Our people become slaves of the Empire." Mi Young's face remained expressionless. "I see, and their deadline?" 53 minutes from now," the Admiral nodded. In the background, an aide rushed up to her with a tablet. She glanced at it quickly before speaking again. "Our situation here is difficult. The orbital defense platforms are down to 30% effectiveness. The evacuation ships are loading, but we need more time." "How much time?" Daeho asked. 6 hours minimum. The civilian transports are moving as fast as they can, but there are children and elderly people. We can't rush them without casualties." Somin felt her heart sink. 6 hours? They had less than an hour before the Valerians lost patience. How could they possibly delay that long? She looked between the ambassador and the admiral, waiting for someone to explain how they could work miracles. "Ms. Park," Daeho said without turning around. "You seem confused." "Sir, I don't understand. How can we possibly buy 6 hours?" The admiral made it clear that their patience is limited. "They have us completely surrounded." For the first time since boarding the enemy ship, Taehyun Lee spoke up. "Ms. Park, what do you know about our operational protocols?" Somin blinked. She had studied diplomatic procedures extensively. Standard diplomatic protocols call for negotiation, compromise, and peaceful resolution of conflicts. "Not diplomatic protocols," Taehyun said quietly. "Human protocols. The rules we live by. I'm not sure I understand." Taehyun stepped forward. Until now, he had seemed like a simple security guard. But something in his voice had changed. There was steel underneath the quiet words. "Rule number 1. We never leave our people behind. Rule number 2. We never surrender while our people are in danger. Rule number 3. When all else fails, remind them why humans survived the Long Dark." So Min had heard of the Long Dark, but only in history classes. Ancient history from thousands of years ago. What did that have to do with their current situation? Admiral Mi-young's image nodded grimly. The Valerians don't know about the Long Dark, do they? No, Daeho replied. They've only known us for 50 years. They think this war started when they invaded our colonies. They don't understand that for us this is just another Tuesday. Another Tuesday, So-min whispered. Sir, they're about to destroy our entire civilization. Daeho turned to look at her for the first time since entering the communications room. His tired eyes seemed much older than his face. Miss Park, what do you think happened to the Devourers? The name sent a chill down So-min's spine. Every human child learned about the Devourers in school, but only basic facts. They were an ancient enemy that had attacked humanity long ago. The details were usually saved for advanced history courses. They were defeated, she said slowly. But that was 2,000 years ago. The technology was completely different. The situations aren't comparable, aren't they? Admiral Mi-young asked from Earth. Overwhelming enemy forces. Impossible odds. The complete destruction of human civilization threatened. How is this different? Taehyun moved to stand beside the ambassador. Officer Lee, Terran Special Operations Division, he said formally. My family has served in special operations for 12 generations. We've been preparing for this day since the Long Dark ended. So-min stared at him. Special operations? But you're just a security officer. Cover identity, Taehyun replied simply. My real job is making sure that if someone threatens human civilians, they learn why that's a bad idea. The quantum link crackled with interference as another explosion shook Earth Command. Admiral Mi-young steadied herself and continued. The evacuation ships are civilian vessels, Daeho. Mostly families with children. The Valerians think they're chasing refugees. They have no idea what's really happening. And our friends? Daeho asked, in position. They've been waiting for the signal. So-min's head was spinning. What friends? Our fleets are destroyed. Everyone knows that. Daeho smiled for the first time since the meeting began. It was not a happy smile. Ms. Park, you're thinking like a diplomat. Sometimes the best negotiation happens when the other side doesn't know they're negotiating. The Valerians believe they won this war 3 days ago, Admiral Mi-young explained, when our defense fleet was destroyed at New Seoul. They think everything since then has been cleanup operations. But they did win. So-min protested. We saw the battle reports. Our ships were destroyed. Our visible ships, Taehyun corrected. The ships they knew about. The ships we wanted them to see. The pieces began falling into place in So-min's mind, but she couldn't believe what she was thinking. You mean this was planned? The defeat? The surrender meeting? Not planned, Daeho said. Prepared for. There's a difference. We hoped it wouldn't come to this. But if it did, we were ready. Admiral Mi-young checked something off screen. Time check, 47 minutes until your deadline. Are you proceeding with Phase 2? Confirmed, Daeho replied. Rule number 1 is in effect. What's Phase 2? So-min asked. Instead of answering, Daeho closed the quantum link. The holographic image of Admiral Mi-young faded away, leaving them alone in the small communications room. Ms. Park, the ambassador said gently, you're about to learn something that isn't taught in diplomatic school. Sometimes the best way to win a negotiation is to let the other side think they've already won. Taehyun checked his watch. 45 minutes. We should return to the Admiral. As they prepared to leave their ship, So-min grabbed Daeho's arm. Sir, please. I need to understand. What is rule number 1 really about? The ambassador paused at the airlock door. Rule number 1 isn't just about never leaving people behind, Ms. Park. It's about what humans do when someone threatens our children. The Valerians are about to find out that there are some lines you don't cross. And if it doesn't work, then we follow rule number 3, Taehyun said quietly. And remind them why the Devourers are extinct. As they walked back through the massive Valerian ship, So-min tried to process everything she had learned. Somehow the impossible situation they were in was not what it appeared to be. The humans had plans within plans and the war was not over. But she still didn't understand how 3 people on a tiny ship could threaten an entire galactic empire. She was about to find out.